Everyone here knows this is the Planning and Zoning Committee of Council. We have a heading citizens' concerns, but I suspect many are here relating to specific issues.
There is one gentleman who does.
Oh, there's one citizen concern that's not part of the agenda. Come on up.
May I see this down?
Yep, that's fine. If you could just give us your name and address and then.
My name is Ray Heath. My wife Nancy and I live at 28596 Woodland here in Perrysburg. And I've come tonight to try to respectfully get you gentlemen to revisit the ordinance that allows campers in driveways for 7 months. We've been here going on 6 years now, pretty soon. And we love it here. We love the city, the history, and our beautiful neighborhood. But this now is the picture from that same spot that we get for 7 months out of the year. And I know it's legal, we've checked into all of that. But I'm asking you to revisit it because, well, there are other alternatives. The gentleman that owns that has a business in Cedar Park, and he has a fenced-in lot that he could park it there for free. And right down on 795, there's another storage lot that only charges $35 a month for one of these things. Now, in the remaining months that it's not out in the front, you have required it to be in the backyard. Now, I don't know, perhaps that's an alternative. Some driveways here in Perrysburg would accommodate a thing like that. His driveway is 36 feet long and the trailer's 34 feet. And as you can see, we can't see down the road, we can't see our neighbors, we can't even see out in the street unless we come all the way out to the sidewalk. We didn't come out to Perrysburg for that. I don't want to see that. I'm just asking you to please think about revisiting it. Maybe there's another way without canceling the ordinance altogether. Maybe there's another way to do it. But it seems to me that if he was going to build a 10-foot fence in the front of that, he couldn't do it because you guys wouldn't let him. But he can put this here and it accomplishes the same thing. If my other neighbor on the other side put one of those there, we'd be locked in and we could only see the road. So that's why we're here, and I was hoping that perhaps something might be addressed about that.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Do either of you know
Thank you.
the applicable code section?
Yeah, what's the ordinance number on that?
I think it's in 600. Is it in the zoning code?
It is.
Okay.
I'll look it up. One second. Sections. That is.
Oh, eyes on
Oh, you're all waiting on me? I figured we were waiting on Mark.
Yep, it's 1250.41.
1250.41.
What is the time frame?
From April 1st until October 31st. That's what's permitted. When it's permitted in your driveway.
I'm sorry, I didn't know if there was going to be any more questions from you folks. Or
No, we're just trying to get a look at the ordinance now to see.
I got a copy of it.
You can take a seat. We'll drag you back up if we have questions. Okay, so if it's in the front yard, it's gotta be an impervious and dustless surface. Located not close to blah, blah, okay. That's just what this gentleman said, during November 1st and March 31st, it's gotta be in the rear yard.
What's our rule on parking in the roadway on hitched trailers?
That was recently changed due to the partridge quail.
Was it like 48 hours you were allowed to do it?
It might have, I think it got increased from that, maybe 72 or something now, but that's a 600 chapter Not sure what the specifics of that are.
Yeah, I didn't know this. You could do that for that long of a period of time.
Yeah, I assume it's somehow tied to the period of time people are typically using their motor vehicles, homes, or whatever we call those. Although I don't know how much of that goes on in April or October, but
Is there a size limitation?
doesn't appear to be.
So it could be a 12-foot fishing boat or
Can't be
Well, it's
within
recreational.
5 feet of the lot line, and it's got to be on basically a paved surface.
Yeah.
That's if it's in the front.
Any recreational equipment, I don't know how that's defined, but
Trailers, boats,
certainly,
RVs.
correct, this probably does comply with the code. And I don't know when we last considered how long a period of time is needed. I mean, maybe I could ask you one question. Do you, I mean, this is very anecdotal because it's limited to one person with one recreational vehicle, but do you have any sense of when your neighbor is using that thing? You know, pulling it out of the driveway, going somewhere? I mean,
Sometimes it sits there for 2 or 3 weeks, and then he'll go away for a couple days, or sometimes it's been sometimes every weekend. But it's, you know, then it comes right back on Sunday night. So
okay, but I wondered how much someone's moving around in them in April of the year.
no, it sits there. It just sits there, and I understand you're all for property rights, but we have property rights as well, I hope. And there's way more of us who do not want to camp or put campers in our driveway than do want to.
Yeah.
So I hope the majority makes a difference.
Have you talked to your neighbor?
I have.
I assume it didn't go
Yes, and it's not.
optimally.
Well, he was very proud of it, and we came over and congratulated him and everything. But he said to the one neighbor that he was going to leave it there, and she said, "You're kidding." And he goes, "No." He said, "Why would you do that?" We were all standing around congratulating him, and he said, "Because I can." So I went and talked to him personally, and I said, "You know, you're blocking our view of the whole neighborhood." I said, "Don't you have any consideration for us?" And he said, "We're not doing anything to hurt you." And he went back in the house. So I don't want to be animosity all the time.
Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah, I don't.
But that's all we get to look at for 7 months. It sits there, according to the law.
Well, it's just the alternatives you suggest sound like pretty good ones, but I know it's not your job to police him, but,
No, but if it's okay to park it back there in the back for the remaining 5 months, why couldn't they do it all the time?
Yeah.
And then that way it wouldn't be an issue in the front of the house for all the rest of the neighbors to deal with.
So you obviously looked at the code. Is there any suggestion or remedy you're seeking? I guess I know that you want the problem fixed. Is there some sort of language that you would suggest that would solve your problem that wouldn't necessarily?
I guess right off the bat, I would say if they can put it in the backyard for those 5 months, they can put it in the backyard all the time. Or, like the other neighbors, we sold our camper this summer, so I know of which I speak. That lot down on 795, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's $35 a month. It's not going to break anybody to put that there. And like I said before, he has a business that he could park it at for free. So I don't know what else to do. This is my next step.
yeah, I agree. And when he parks it in the rear yard during the winter months, well, where does he put it?
He hasn't done that. He just bought that this summer. There won't be any room back there anyway.
Oh, okay.
There's a drainage easement issue back there. We wanted to put a swimming pool in, and we can't because of that drainage issue. So he won't have room for that back there either.
So he's gonna have to-
But there are houses that this thing would not be obtrusive. I mean, 200-foot driveways or something, where it's not going to be an issue. But this thing is only 2 feet shorter than his whole driveway. It takes up, well, you saw the picture, it takes up the whole thing.
I'm actually surprised. So we can, if I'm interpreting this correctly, you can park a RV in the backyard or a trailer in the backyard where there's no concrete during the winter?
Yes.
That was not the recommendation that we made, but that's what was adopted.
Okay, and that was passed in 18, it looks like. Okay,
I just
that's
appreciate it.
surprising to me. I would not have thought.
Well, then you'll have the neighbors in the rear who aren't gonna be
Happy with that, especially when there's no concrete pad or any
apparently in your ordinance, there's no size limitation. That's why the thing,
Yeah, the size limitation seems to be, the only constraint is if it can fit within 5 feet or doesn't encroach 5 feet to the lot line, so.
well, it's not a lot line issue, it's a sight line issue.
Right, yeah, oh, yeah.
All right,
Thank
well,
you.
sure, thank you. I guess the option we have is whether to refer to the planning commission for consideration. See, if there's a potential change in the zoning code, that has to be considered by the planning commission. This committee can vote to refer it to them. I mean, do you guys think this is an issue that, I'm putting you on the spot here, but are there potential solutions you could see, or is it something you'd want to give some thought to?
Well, I mean, my first thought was that I would be inclined to dust off some of the recommendations that we made before that it weren't as generous as what they are now. For example, parking in the rear yard. The recommendation that we brought forward is to make sure you had a dedicated concrete pad for a boat or a camper. That way it wasn't sinking down in the mud and doing those sorts of things. But we could certainly shorten that window of time. It's really hard to do. Some communities will say you can't have it in your driveway for more than 48 hours in a row, because then it's a chess game of they move it to the street, they move it back, and the reality is we're not going to go around and chalk tires and that sort of thing. So I don't know that I have a perfect answer for you right now, but we can certainly look at it. We can refer to the planning commission to see if they think it's appropriate. I think what we have now is perhaps overly generous for property owners that have these types of things. Because we have had a lot of complaints over the years of old boats that will clearly never see the water again, or campers that haven't been used in years, and things like that people just don't let go of, but aren't functional. So some people have used this new provision to keep things like that around that are more of a nuisance.
Okay, well,
Do you mind leaving those pictures? I think that might be helpful if it gets.
Yeah.
I've got more if you want. It goes all the way out to the sidewalk. But this essentially, it shows you what our dilemma is. You have to go all the way out to the sidewalk to see down there. So, I appreciate your thinking about it at least, you know.
Yeah.
We're at a dilemma. We don't have any other resource here.
Yeah, I didn't explain the procedure to you. We if we're going to consider a change in the zoning code, that has to go to the planning commission first. And then they take a look at it and give it some thought. That gives Brody and Mark some time to think about this issue, research some of the history of it, and then present it to the planning commission. And then ultimately, if there's a change recommended, it does come back to council. So I'm
available if somebody needs me.
Do you have an HOA?
I'm sorry?
Do you have an HOA?
No, we do not.
Okay.
No, that's another issue that I looked into and
Okay.
can't get any relief there.
Okay. All right, I'd say a referral makes sense then.
I agree with that, yeah.
Yes. Why don't you hang on to this, Brody, so that you get that into the hands of
We have a
the
lot of driveways like that in the old subdivision.
with campers in them?
Would not, no, the short driveways where it'll completely impede the view of the front yard.
Yeah. Well, let them think about that. That does seem like 7 months out of the year is quite a bit. All right, then, moving along the minutes of the September 15 meeting, any problems?
Nope.
All right, we're good. The issue we had last month, I think it was last month, the rezoning request for the property on Echo Junction Road. Brody, could you maybe summarize what's happened since our last meeting on this issue?
Yeah, I'll do my best. And we have Josh here with Simon CRE on behalf of the applicant again. So conversations with the applicant regarding what looked to be a potential denial of the rezoning request from Office of Service to C4 prompted a discussion to examine their tenants to understand if they could get by with something that would perhaps be less intense than the C4 zoning, which is the highway commercial zoning. C3 is community shopping, so it is essentially what we'll call a step down in intensity. Josh and maybe Ian on his team acknowledged that the C3 zoning would accomplish the goals that they would have for locating tenants on this property. We went kind of back in a planning conversation and still defended the C4 as the most appropriate zoning based on the surrounding land uses. That was part of the reason that we went into it with C4 rather than C3, because this wasn't a matter of simply trying to accomplish their goal. It was trying to make the goal make sense with the city's plans and the surrounding development, which is fairly consistently C4. So, like I said, we went into that with the mindset of trying to do what we thought was right for the zoning map. Somewhat backfired, I guess. And so now we're coming back just with the goal of satisfying their objective of developing the property for commercial use and blending that with the desires and the concerns that we heard from the residents of Calendar Court. So brought that back to the Planning Commission at their last meeting. It was better received this time as C3 zoning as opposed to C4. There was one member who voted against it. I got the impression that vote against that was more on the procedural end of things, not new notices going out. So there was a slightly different notification process that was used. So I believe the member voted no for that reason, not because she was necessarily opposed to the actual rezoning itself. So that brings us to this meeting here. I guess I'm speaking on behalf of Josh and his team that C3 does accomplish their goals. They're open to that for that portion of property. The property has remained the same. I've provided some illustrations that I think there was some confusion on last time that identify a potential building footprint, maybe some distances from back doors and things like that from a meeting that I was not able to attend. So I've also included the chart there that shows the differences between C3 and C4. I've highlighted the parts where they differ. If anybody's unfamiliar with that chart, blank box means it cannot be done. P means that it's permitted use by right, and then the S is a special approval box. I have not had any feedback from the folks at Calendar Court directly with myself, so I don't know how this has been received on the other end.
Yeah, and I understand that there was a notice issue with the planning commission, so I know that there's a concern about that. On this, did you do this chart, Brody?
Yes,
Graph?
that is a document that I have provided, yes.
Okay. Can you draw on here or estimate where that entry drive comes in?
Well, the entrance drive would take place off of the existing driveway,
Is that, that's up here?
so that would be off of.
Okay, so that is the entry drive.
There would be
Okay.
nothing across here, so there's a fully signalized intersection here as
Okay.
well as part of the Costco project.
Gotcha.
Any traffic coming into this site here would be required to come to that stoplight and either make a right in or a left in at the fully signalized light, and an access driveway into a parking lot would be coming off the west-hand side of this existing drive. And what I explained in the past meetings is that the entire frontage along Echo Junction Road here, and actually bending the corner, I believe, partway up this driveway, there's an anti-vehicular access easement that was granted as part of the creation of this lot from the larger Black Diamond property. So there's a legal instrument that is recorded that would prohibit any access directly onto Echo Junction Road without going through that fully signalized intersection.
And then if I'm having trouble reading these small numbers, but this is about 1.8 acres
I believe that's correct, yes.
that's proposed to be rezoned now to C3 instead of C4.
1.833.
Okay. All right. I guess the way we would usually proceed is give the applicant a chance to say anything he might wish to offer, and then we'll obviously give the neighbors a chance to speak to the issue as well. So, Josh, you can go ahead and add anything you want to add to Brody's report.
Yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to speak again. We're happy to be here, able to present our project. In the spirit of keeping things brief and concise, I would say that Brody has represented our project accurately, as well as our kind of pivot towards a goal that works both for us and something that the city would feel comfortable with as well. We welcome questions, comments from the community and otherwise in the process. Thank you.
Okay. And Josh, I
Excuse me
think
for
you.
interrupting, but could I ask that you raise your voices a little? It's kind of difficult to hear.
Oh, really? Okay.
Thank you.
Well, the masks don't help.
Yeah.
Josh, you alluded to last time, I know you can't disclose the identity of the project that's presently under consideration, but I think you told us enough to say it's like one of these auto parts retailer type things. Is that still the case?
Yeah, right now we have not pivoted in any different direction than what we had previously discussed in Planning Commission and the previous round of City Council. You know, a lot of our future negotiation or otherwise securing the proper tenant for this location is going to be based on the premise of this zoning moving forward. But at this time, that's correct. There have not been any adjustments since our previous discussions.
Okay. And I know the zoning, we can't assume a use and choose our zoning that way. We have to do the right land use for that area. But would one of those type stores, would they typically occupy a 1.8 acre parcel? Is that more than they usually have, less than they usually have, about usual, or do they adjust?
I mean, it varies based on the type of site program that we pursue. With this particular type, we're going to need to account for all of the buffering, setbacks, and otherwise. And the exhibit that Brody had prepared, kind of exemplifying generally what we would be looking at, which is approximately 7,500 square foot building, and included parking needed, trash enclosures, etc. We usually end up requiring about 1 to 1.5 net acres. That's the typical target. That being said, 1.88 out is not right out. We have had some sites that are much smaller that we're able to get the same size building footprint in on, and otherwise have had much larger ones in which we would do the same thing. It does offer a little bit of flexibility and latitude, but it wouldn't be necessarily the impact of changing anything based on what we're seeing today.
All right. Okay, I didn't have anything further for Josh. Either of you? Pete, I'm going to assume you're still kind of the spokesperson for the neighbors. I'll let you come up and address the issue again.
Thank you. Peter Gwynn, 31 Calendar Court. I am at least partially the spokesman for the Calendar Court Condominium Association. This is obviously to us much better than C4, which had a lot of very objectionable uses. Before I get started, I would like to say that I wished we had gotten notice of the Planning Commission meeting. This meeting tonight, we all got a card telling us about the meeting, so we knew when to come. Nobody got any notice of the last Planning Commission meeting. When this project was started, Black Diamond, and this was zoned OS, Calendar Corner was already there. There are still, even in C3, some uses which I think are to some degree outdoor animal services, which is a special use, would not be conducive to that neighborhood. Automotive, oil, and lube service facilities, that wouldn't be appropriate. Carryouts, for alcoholic beverages, and that's a special use. Drive-in restaurants, fast food restaurants, service stations, which again is a special use. So there are still a few uses that we would certainly hope would not go in there. I guess I have a question or two for Josh. Are we talking, I'm not going to ask who, but how many uses?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Peter. At this time, we only have one tenant in mind. And further than that, and I just want to play this out hypothetically to try and kind of cover the base that I think you're looking at here, which the question is, are there going to be more than one users at the end of the day here? The answer is the only way that that would work is if you had small enough end users that they were able to, from an operational standpoint, actually work, both logistically, operationally, and of course within accordance to your zoning ordinance, building codes, and any other kind of permitting that would be required there. And so to that point, we are not personally targeting that strategy. That's not what we have in mind for this at the moment. However, understanding that the underlying zoning will be what drives that, I cannot prevent more than one user having interest here in the future. But if that were the case, of course, that would once again be fall upon council and otherwise to make the decision as to whether or not that were allowable or whether there was any kind of conflict to be concerned with. But again, just reiterating that at this time, we are not pursuing that approach to using this property. We have currently a single tenant in mind.
I have a couple of questions to Mr. Walters as well. How big a building can they build on that property? And where would it be located? Is it this area? I think this is your map from the last time.
That is a,
We named the map after you.
I did create the map. So that was just a theoretical building that could be allowable on that property based on my knowledge of the end user that they're looking for. In terms of what they could put on that building, the building could be larger than that. We are limited by setbacks, which I believe are shown on the drawing here.
Are these setbacks, I show one at 255, one at 290, and one at 310. Is that accurate?
25%.
What you're talking about is the distance that I showed from the theoretical building to the closest part of the houses, correct?
Okay.
So what I'm talking about is the actual setbacks. So on the property, as you see here indicated in red, the split parcel, there's a certain number of feet setback from each of the four sides of that property. That would limit the size of the building. And is there a lot coverage percent?
25%. Thanks.
So Mark is showing me here that there's also a 25% lot coverage for the building limitation. So I can't tell you exactly the configuration where it's exactly going to be at on site, but what I can tell you is that without an access drive coming in off of Echo Junction Road, an access drive here, people don't develop retail centers that you have to drive into the end of a building or around a building to get to a parking field. So that tells me that the building is likely to favor the west side of the property, with the parking fields being closest to the entrance and exits.
We're talking about 1.8 acres here, which is 65,000 square feet, and you're saying 25% coverage?
That's the maximum percent coverage, yes.
Yes, okay. So what is that, 17,000, something like that?
Pretty close.
So we're talking about, we could have more than the 7,500 square foot auto parts store on this property.
The other consideration too is, as Josh explained, this site may be larger than what they typically shoot for of an acre to an acre and a half. But with additional stormwater requirements, there's going to be required to have on-site detention requirements for this site. It is more cost effective to do those above ground than it is below ground. So I would imagine that you will see some type of water feature here like you see north of that on that property for Black Diamond. That will eat up some real estate. You'll see buffering, you'll see an entrance drive, parking lot, a building, and then their requirement for meeting our landscape requirements. So even though the math plays out that you did, roughly 17,000 square feet, I don't think that's realistic, because that fails to take into account, like I said, the stormwater, the trees, the driveways, the parking lots, and those setbacks for those purposes.
Just as an aside, I would hope that the detention would be better than the pigsty that is out there now. We would also ask of the developer that he be sensitive to the condominiums next door as far as fencing, lighting, dumpster dumping at 4 a.m. We are a very nice residential area, and obviously, we are not in favor of this, but this is certainly an improvement over what was previously requested.
Yeah,
If I could just add on to what Mr. Gwynn said, this project, so this is really only one stage of the project, which is a rezoning. Any proposed building, project, layout, building size, building materials, placement of dumpsters, all of those things, there's another very lengthy process that has gone through, and that's referred to as site plan review. So the Municipal Planning Commission would be charged with reviewing to making sure that the landscape and the setbacks is properly enclosed, that is properly located on site, that the building is made out of materials that are acceptable with city codes. So there's a lot of review on specifics that would come forward regardless of what any end user is. As well as another stage that follows that up, which is the city's, we call it the engineering review, but making sure that the stormwater and that all the utilities and that the site distances and all of those things are consistent with city code. So there will be higher and higher levels of review. This is just simply creating a parcel and assigning certain rights to it, and then how those rights materialize on the site will then be reviewed in separate processes.
yeah, which is a good point to make, but I think what I'm hearing from the folks is that happened with Black Diamond, and that didn't turn out so well
No,
in terms of their ongoing compliance with it. Or
no.
there's a lady.
Non-compliance.
Yeah, name and address, and then you can say whatever you want.
Joanne Tallarico, number 12, Calendar Court. I feel that there are some things that you don't particularly know about the access, ingress, egress of the property. I would like to share that information with you. First of all, I lived directly behind said property location that you're talking about. So my backyard faces Black Diamond, etc., and the property. Currently, what happens with Black Diamond Drive, which I think you need to be aware of, is people use that road to access properties over on 25 where Churchill's, the bank, McDonald's, all of those properties, that's a cut through. People come up to that stop sign, they make their turn into that property, they come up to Black Diamond's parking lot, and they cut across. Now, I have sat on my deck and counted in 15 minutes at least 20 cars that would do that. So now you're talking about putting a entrance to this property on Black Diamond Road, which I understand is probably the only place you can put that entrance. However, what's going to happen when people come out of the new constructed building that they're going to create there and make a left-hand turn? And that's going to be that many more cars cutting through Black Diamond property in order to access properties on 25. That is a concern. And I think that you don't know that because you don't live there and you don't see that, but that is something that we see. The other thing I would like to address is how well is the city going to protect us residents as far as you're saying all the right things about how you want it to look and what's going to happen, but we know from experience what actually happened with Black Diamond. First of all, Black Diamond's parking lot is running the wrong directions according to the site plan that was sent to the committee, to the city, in the original plan. We had that original plan. We saw it. We know it's wrong. The city never did anything to correct it. Had they done that, it would have made a difference in the view that our properties have of Black Diamond. Now I heard mention a little bit ago about another water place or drainage area. You need to look at the ditch, the pond that's currently there, because that is an eyesore. That is a safety hazard. There are children occasionally that walk past there. It's open, it's filthy. They started an attempt to put stones and redo everything. The pile of stones has been there over a year. We've been looking at a pile of stones for over a year. The guy's talking about looking at a trailer. We're looking at a pile of stones plus all the other debris. We have pictures. We also have pictures that we took 2 years ago of the mess that it is. So we're reluctant to trust that, number one, the city will go in there and protect what we have to look at, our view and our property values. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, someone else had a hand up, sorry.
Hi, Lenore Pullman, number 9. I am currently across the street from Joanne. My concern is, have you considered the traffic that this is going to cause more cars coming in and out? No disrespect to you, Mr. Walters, but when Costco went in, you said there was room for 7 cars between our street and the light. There is not. There's only 5 cars you can get in there. Now, coming left, if I come from the left, I have to cross into our street. I cross a yellow diamond with yellow flashlights, which I think is illegal for me to cross. If I don't cross, I'm liable to get rear-ended because all the cars are coming out of Costco, and that's a danger. 2 months ago, I was turning in, and I was in that yellow diamond, and a car's coming slowly towards the other one, but somebody decides to fly around them and pass them, and if I hadn't gotten in, I'd have got hit right there. So and the bank isn't even open yet. This traffic situation, I drive to Bowling Green a couple times a month. It's easier to drive 25 through Levis than it is this intersection. And I think you should highly consider, we have one way in and one way out on that street. We are all self-maintained on that road. We take care of all of that ourselves. And I think you're making a big mistake. And what Joanne is saying also about adding more traffic, I actually am one of those cars that cuts through there. So I'm guilty of that. But I think you have to consider any more traffic at that intersection with that bank open, with Costco, and there's times we can't get out of our street now. And then they get backed up from the light. There was a rollover 2 years ago right there on Eckel between the light and that cutoff for Black Diamond, or where American Table is. You have accidents all the time on that intersection, more than any other intersection in Perrysburg. It's a terrible situation, and I don't see how you can put any more traffic in there. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's all I
thank
have
you.
to say,
And-
except you can turn your microphones up because we can't hear.
We'll try and do better. I can tell you, we're painfully aware of the traffic situation at that intersection. Some of you were here on the Costco debate, and that was a principal concern, because at that time, that intersection was rated a D. If it's improved at all, it's still a C minus if we're lucky. And I'm through there a lot. I've never seen what you said. I've never seen anyone go down that thing I didn't know you could get through there.
all the time. Don't tell people, they'll start doing it.
Oh,
I used to live over on Running Brook, so well aware of that cut through.
You're
I-
well
I
aware
did.
of that?
Oh yeah, from McDonald's, a lot, that area, cutting through there. I was one of those offenders as well, quite often. So yes, well aware that you can get through there if the gate's open,
Well,
which it used to be closed all the time.
my concern is that with another business there, you're multiplying the number of people that would make that cut through there. And that could be a safety hazard as well, especially for Black Diamond, because it's their property. Now, I do understand that it's possible that they might be able to move their gates. They have a gate now that they lock at 6 o'clock, open at 9 o'clock in the morning, close at 6 o'clock at night. Now, they could possibly move that gate over beyond where this entrance would come for this new construction, as far as the entrance to that new building would be. But that would limit Black Diamond's access to their property, and their trucks come through there. Those are the trucks that come and deliver all of the mulch and everything that they need. So I don't know if they would be able to move that gate. But the only solution to prevent people from cutting through there, extra people, would be to move that gate, as far as what I can see. But that's something for you to look at and think about.
yeah, and I don't know that Black Diamond benefits by having people cut through there. You wouldn't think,
No, they don't.
they wouldn't want to be,
I think that's why they do the gates at night.
yeah. So there may be something that can happen with that, but the issue that we're faced with is the logical extension of what the lady just said is to say you can't put anything there. And we can't deny a property owner some use of the property that complies with our zoning code in some general respect. I'm looking at the property right now. And so that kind of puts us in a certain position, unless we're going to go in and buy it, and I don't see that in the foreseeable future. So we have to think, okay, if they have a right to use the property, what's the zoning that should attach? And I think we're probably all pretty familiar with the intersection. I go through there a lot. I'm sure Barry and Corey do as well. I was through there this morning and the traffic was way backed up. But we were doing some striping up near the intersection. I hope that was the problem. I hope that's not an everyday occurrence. But as you examine the zoning, that OS zoning category that it holds down, that's almost like a vestigial organ. It only exists in I looked on a zoning map, I couldn't even find any. I had to email Brody and say, where in the heck do we even have any OS in town? And there's,
You gotta zoom out pretty far.
oh, it's like a
25 has
couple
to go.
banks on the corner of Indiana and South Boundary, and
I think that land that just went for auction across from Levis Commons and Roaches.
is that okay?
But I'm sure we'll be hearing a zoning appeal on that.
But you don't see, you can't pick it out on a zoning map because it's so, it's almost like a historical reference. And so then we begin to think of zoning. I thought C4 was too much of a stretch here. And I looked down at the list of what the uses that are no longer allowed in a C3 that are in a C4. It certainly is an improvement. And I think, and this is fair warning to Josh for his potential client, but I think site plan review in this case is going to be pretty exacting, unfortunately for them, because of the experience everyone's had with Black Diamond. And I don't know what we can do to address some of the issues you raised, where there may be a history I'm not familiar with as to how they configured their parking differently than what was approved. I don't know about that history, but I think, and I'll let these guys speak and I'll quit babbling, but I think C3 is an improvement. As I said last meeting, I was not comfortable with C4 at all, but it's going to be commercially zoned. I kind of hope a tenant like this comes through, because I think, you know, a tenant that isn't open past 8 or 9 at night and at 6 in the morning would be a better neighboring use for Calendar Corner than what some other possibilities. It could be awful. I know we have issues with that traffic burden at that corner, but the other thing that kind of scares me a little bit is there's a whole bunch of undeveloped land next to Costco that you're all well aware of. There was talk at times of a church going in there, and
They still want it. They do still want that as well.
what's that?
They still are planning that as well.
Oh, they are.
They had some funding issues with the church. They have, I guess it's like a national organization. I spoke with the head of it's the same church that's here on River Road, just next to the cemetery. Yes, Beth. So it's they own that property. They fully plan on developing it into their new church home. But I know they have some funding issues, like on a national level.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, that would be better for the intersection. I'm sure better for you folks who have to live right near it. Yes, ma'am.
Except for maybe Sundays.
What?
Except for maybe Sundays.
Sunday morning.
Teresa Romp, 10 Calendar Court. I'm just wondering if you could clarify something. My understanding is Josh's interest is in a portion of the Black Diamond property. And the portion they would not be interested in stays OS. And it's sort of, if I'm understanding, sort of a fat L-shaped piece of property that would remain. How would that look for potential future use?
So basically, that part that you're talking about is the current Black Diamond parking lot and driveway.
Is that what's in there?
That's this right here. So this is
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
because Black Diamond itself is zoned C4. It's like the building.
Oh, okay.
So I think it's just an untouched
I
parcel.
misunderstood that drawing then.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I did too. And I can see it on the photo.
I have just a couple questions, I guess. So I'm going to start with what Pete had called the pigsty. And I think there's really two of them, one along Craig Drive and then behind where this building may go. Who is in charge of making sure that that stays? Is it? I mean, I know it's personal property, but you'd think there'd be some level of, because it's never taken care of.
Which I believe is Wood County. I think we went down that road before.
Not the ditch that runs beside.
You're talking this.
Yes, on Craig Drive, correct.
So I think is that the pond you're talking about?
Well, there's two. There's the I'm going to call it a retention pond behind where the building will go, if it goes, right. And then the one along Craig Drive, on the, we'll call it the front side of Black Diamond. You know, my question is, what kind of monitoring is there of keeping that clean?
Well, I think there's two answers to that. There's a functional answer. So the Department of Public Utilities, the stormwater technician, is responsible for making sure that detention facilities are operating and are maintained so that they're functioning properly. They have a very specific job that they do. They're designed to hold water during storms and to filter out pollutants. So there's a functional component to that. So that's Department of Public Utilities that handles to making sure that it's actually working properly. Our office could be involved for aesthetic purposes. For example, if it's full of trash, if it's completely overgrown with weeds, although one would suggest if it's completely overgrown with weeds, it may not be functioning properly also. So it could be planning and zoning issue, it could be a Department of Public Utilities issue, it could be a joint issue, depending on what the problem actually is. If it just looks bad, but it's working okay, then that's probably my issue. If it looks bad and it's not working well, solving the functioning issue is probably going to solve the aesthetic issue as well, so.
Because
I hope that answers your question.
it does, thank you. Because there's a dramatic difference between those two items I've just identified and then the ditch that runs behind Calendar Court. So, and you said that's county? Is that, okay. And then another question, I've heard said, and never really, I guess, asked this question, but there seems to be a negative connotation with spot zoning. And I've just heard it said in various conversations. So why would a community be opposed to spot zoning since that's what this would be? So if you would.
Yeah.
Well, it's,
Take that, Brody, or-
yeah, it's actually more of a legal question. So the courts have ruled that spot zoning is actually illegal when you're doing that. So what you're supposed to do in zoning is have what they refer to as zoning districts, which means that you're not getting down into you're not going in the middle of a residential neighborhood and saying, we want a commercial business in the middle of that. Because if you pick out a singular parcel and treat that differently than you do a larger district or adjacent properties, then you're somehow can be either favoring or disfavoring that particular property. So you shouldn't spot zone something because 3 mayors ago owned it and he's gonna make money off of that property by making it commercial somewhere where it doesn't fit. So think about spot zoning as putting a square peg in a round hole. Here, what we were trying to really avoid, and I wouldn't make the argument, and I'm not the courts or the judge or the jury, what you see is an office and service property, current right here. You have multifamily, office and service, and commercial all the way around it. I don't believe that spot zoning gets into the depth of what degree of commercial that you choose. Because think about this, this is residential, this is really commercial as well. Office is a commercial use, and then this is all commercial. So the fact that you have C3 and C4, I don't believe that's spot zoning. What we were trying to do is justify the conversion of the office and service property into C4 because we could create a larger district without introducing a new use that wasn't the same as something next to it. So zoning encourages you to come up with districts with reasonable boundaries of what you should expect to find within those boundaries. Does that help?
It does. Just because it's a C3 or C4 does not make it, by definition, spot zoning.
Correct. The courts have typically not gone that deep with it.
Okay.
And they've just simply said it's an extension of a commercial district.
Okay.
So I don't think we have any fear of that. In fact, the office and service designation is a more likely candidate for spot zoning than what we're doing now.
Okay.
But like I said, again, we were trying to make it very consistent in the original application to say all of the neighbors, we just want to absorb this and actually create a cleaner line. From a planning standpoint, that's what planners do, is they come up with nice districts and that sort of thing. And this is a little bit, carved out with C3 because the uses aren't exactly the same within the district, but it's still a commercial use. So I don't think the spot zoning fear exists.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd second what Brody said. When the original assignment of OS zoning, we may have been a little bit out on a limb there, but we did so because of what these folks are saying. We knew right down here, you got an intersection that's just a mess. It's actually, I think, gotten better since Costco came in, but it's still a problem. So I think we plugged that OS in there. We thought we're going to find the least intense potential use. And so we plugged OS in there. I don't think any one of us who did that at the time thought that might necessarily be the final answer, but we were just trying to tamp down the area as much as we could to relieve the pressure up on that intersection. And yeah, with the C3, when you got C4, there's not a spot zoning issue. It's just a question of what the correct zoning is, in my view.
And I guess my last comment is that we do need to do something different than OS.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
And what I will say is that C1, the issue is raised of C1. C1 and OS are first cousins. C2 allows folks to build all the way to the property lines with no setbacks, no parking requirements. it's problematic, zoning for a parcel like this. C2 is what our downtown business district is what allows buildings to be built out to the sidewalk and essentially have 100% site coverage. So I don't know that that's advantageous, from some of the concerns that I'm hearing either. So we have 4 choices of commercial. C1 is essentially OS. C2 doesn't really work. We tried the C4, that wasn't popular. C3 kind of seems to be almost like the winner by default.
All right. Go
I mean,
ahead.
I don't think there's too much else I can add to this. I think the spot, it almost appears the spot zoning when it is OS, so I kind of echo the same thoughts that it's got to be zoned something commercial, and by default, I'm fine with C3. I hope that's something that you guys can live with. I know that it's not ideal. It'd be a lot better with an open lot staying there. And now that I'm looking at Google Maps, I totally get what you're saying about these drainage ponds or these pigsties. I think that's appropriate to call them that. If I'm looking at a still photo of Google and it looks terrible, that concerns me. So I get your apprehension. I'm getting a clearer picture of your apprehension of, Black Diamond may not have been the best neighbor thus far while you're living there. But that aside, we're looking at a vacant lot with a potential tenant that seems like it's going to fit well there, or better than other potential commercial tenants. So yeah, I get where you're coming from, but yeah, I think it's going to be appropriately zoned commercial or C3.
I mean, Brody, it's beyond probably the issue tonight, but this, with some cooperation from Black Diamond, couldn't we make some suggestions to deal with this cut-through option that I never knew existed until about 20 minutes ago? Because again, I don't think that's conducive to their use. I don't think they're like a drive-by use. Someone will say, "Oh, there's Black Diamond." I think they'll go buy some plants. So
I think there's 2 things that come to mind. Number one is somebody mentioned that the Black Diamond doesn't necessarily benefit. And in fact, it's a detriment because they risk somebody hitting a light pole or causing property damage or whatever the case is. Obviously, wear and tear on their parking lot surfaces. The other thing that is a potential is to have the police monitor that. If it can be demonstrated that somebody is using that cut through to avoid a traffic control device, that's a violation of the driving code. But there may be a more practical, workable solution of having Black Diamond relocate a gate, from here along Agawam Junction back to the rear of this property. It is private property, so it's harder. If it was a public street, there's obviously things we could do.
sure, we've got a lot of options.
We can certainly reach out. I don't know that we can require them to do anything if they choose to allow people to drive through their lot, but if we bring them legitimate concerns and offer reasonable solutions, I don't know why they wouldn't be open to that.
Well, I'd like to see us do that because, I mean, obviously they want to get this parcel sold. So we kind of have their attention right now. And it might be a good opportunity to say, hey, you have an issue, the neighbors have an issue, and the city we may all have the same issue. No one really wants people cutting through here. Is there a way we can work together and try and improve that situation? Yes, I fully understand that. There's a lot of traffic down there. I don't live next to it. You people do, but I can't ever remember hardly. Well, occasionally I'll see someone come out of there, but it's probably a lot more than I'm aware of because I just drive through on my way to going somewhere else. But I think if Black Diamond sees that they may be successful in getting this parcel sold, which is of some value to them, maybe it'd be a good time to see if they'd be open to a dialogue about that. So I'd like to see us do that as a part of this process, if you guys could. I mean, I know their lawyer, Pete may know their lawyer, I don't know, it's Dick Malone. He's not the person to talk to. You go to the owner, you don't need to work through lawyers on this, but.
I guess the one thing that I would need to better understand going into a conversation like that is, are we talking, is it simply the quantity of vehicles? Is it the noise of the vehicles? Is it the speed of the vehicles? What is the illness that we're trying to?
The concern is that when you put another business in there, it will increase the number of vehicles that cut through that lot. That was the concern. Now, you mentioned the pond. I would like to share this about the pond, the retention pond. There was a gentleman over there one day looking to clean up that pond. I went over, because it's in my backyard, I went over and I spoke with him, and I said, that I told him I lived right there, and I said, are you going to move these stones? And he says, that's the goal. And he was a 70-year-old man. He was, he told me he was the spouse of the chairman of Black Diamond. So he told me that the problem with the pond is that there's all kind of blockage in it, and the entire pond needs to be cleaned out, excavated out. And I said, you can't do this job. I said, you're 70 years old. I said, you can't do this job. It needs to have a team come in here and clean this up. Because what's happening is Black Diamond's property is flooding on the other side, because that is not draining through to the pond. And so he came. That was 3 or 4 months ago. I've not seen him back. And the stones, like I said, they're over a year. So I'm just concerned, you're gonna put another property there. Is it gonna drain into that pond as well? And is that gonna be another problem? Because we already have a problem. And the problem's not being fixed. And we approached the city before. We went to the city 2 years ago regarding all of this, and nothing came from it. We got no results. So I'm reluctant to think that we're going to put I have faith that his intentions are good and he wants to do the right thing. I'm speaking of Josh. I'm thinking that he's going to do the right thing, but how do we guarantee that? How do you guarantee that to us residents that that's going to happen? Because it didn't happen with Black Diamond. Because Black Diamond, as I said, they didn't adhere to the site plan. Had they only turned their driveway, we would have had green space on our side. Instead, the green space is at the end facing that vacant lot. So that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the road itself is not in the right place. The Black Diamond's access road is over too far, too close to the ditch, which makes it impossible for there to be any green space added along their driveway there to help us at all with our property's views. We've gone through, I don't know what was there, like we see 6 or 8 of us families that we put our own tree barrier line in. We went through the expense to do it ourselves, to try to get some privacy and try to avoid looking at the eyesore. So we've already done that. Now the concern is, will the city monitor this new construction that goes in there? We're not opposed to something going in there. We know something's going to go in there. We just want to make sure that it doesn't infringe on our views and our property values. It has to look right. It has to have green space. And I wrote the original letter to Josh, email, and he did, at that point, I specifically outlined items that we wanted to see in the construction, and he was favorable with all that in the phone conversation that we had with him. So I kind of trust him. but I'm not sure I'm not sure if the city will hold up their end because we've already been screwed. That's basically it. So, so look out for our interests as well.
Well,
That's what I'm asking.
I think this site plan review is gonna be about as exacting as you'll see, because
Okay.
Black Diamond set it up for that. Brody, the issue the lady described with the detention pond not achieving its desired purpose, that sounds like the exact thing you were saying DPU looks at. Okay. I mean, is that something we can have, is that something we can ask someone to do too?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably hundreds or thousands of these that they look at. This one's tucked off of roadways, kind of in a strange place on private property, so it's not front and center. And I know that we get into some significant arguments and debates on how things are going to be fixed, when they're going to be fixed, but we're constantly dealing with ponds and drainage. So we can add this to the list and certainly pass that along and make that a known issue. The other thing that I'd like to add to your comments is that your question is, what can the city do to protect you? The city has passed site design standards in the planning and zoning code, which requires developers to meet certain building material requirements, landscape percentages, tree coverage, parking lot sizes, dumpster enclosure aesthetics, and performance standards for those. We will certainly uphold whatever the Planning Commission approves. But I do want to be very clear that the Planning Commission is a group of 7 citizens, and they will take that document, they will apply that document to the project that Josh's group brings forward. In certain cases, there are, I'm trying to say, not really exceptions, but there's some interpretation on how some of those requirements can be met. So, if you want to make sure your interests are represented to the volunteer folks that are making those interpretation decisions on your behalf and on behalf of every other citizen, you may want to attend those planning commission meetings to make sure that you're expressing what your concerns are. And if you have a different interpretation of the code requirements or how they should be applied, those can be voiced.
Will we be notified?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And what I can tell you is, Mark and I will certainly enforce whatever it is that the Planning Commission agrees is a final site plan for them. And in terms of Black Diamond, that may have not been the case. You may have had a city employee that was not doing their job. I assure you that's not the two of us. It may have been something that the developer came back later on and went through an amendment process, and it was misunderstood by the public as to what the amendment was or is, and maybe it flew under the radar, and what you see at Black Diamond actually is proper. It's a version of the plan that came later that you weren't aware of. So I don't know how that happened, but again, we will certainly uphold whatever it is that the Planning Commission approves. The Planning Commission works on your behalf and on behalf of City Council to make sure that projects like this and all projects function well, they look good, they meet community expectations. So hopefully you've seen that play out, in the design of the Costco building or the Mercy Health building or the ProMedica buildings out at Levis, and some of the new features. I hope that you as the public, are getting what you want out of those chapters that these folks have taken the time to write.
Pete, you've had your hand up. Then
Somebody back there?
yeah, there's Lynn.
Sue Blurmer, what am I, 7 Calendar Court. I've only been there a couple of years, so I've loved hearing the stories that y'all have been telling because I've heard parts of it here and there. But what I'm noticing, when we've been talking about the aesthetics, the actual touchy-feely part of it, I'd like to consider something else. What about the noise? What about that intangible thing of the noise? If you're putting in an auto parts place that does tires, that does that Midas muffler type thing, my heart aches for my west neighbors because I'm on the east side, but my heart aches for the west neighbors. They have to listen to that dentist drill noise all day long, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning and going until 7 o'clock at night. That's going to ruin their backyards.
Well, Sue, I think what we're talking about here is an actual retail place that you walk in and buy parts over the counter. It's not a tire man, it's not a belt tire.
But they do that at AutoZone, don't they? They've put on,
No.
I've heard them make noise all the time. So we need an AutoZone in our neighborhood, when we've already got one just down the street, see, to me, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's, AutoZone is not changing tires. The most that AutoZone will do is maybe put on windshield wipers or put a new battery in your car. And those are virtually silent activities. That's more, I'm not saying that it's AutoZone, but AutoZone has competitors, and the
Right.
intensity of what we're talking about is very similar to that. We're not talking about pneumatic torque wrenches and things like that that are
That's the
dipping,
word I wanted.
hydraulic lifts of picking
Mm-hmm.
up vehicles and doing oil changes. That's not what they're proposing here.
And it's actually not permissible under C3.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to clarify, is to
That would've
make
been a
sure that
C4
that
special
wasn't going
use,
to be
yeah.
put in there, even, like AAA or any of those kinds of things. So one of the main concerns that I'm hearing too from them is the amount of traffic that goes through there. And I've always wondered if that road was even wide enough to handle two-way traffic on it. But I've noticed too, especially when you brought up the Mercy and that intersection there. Can you guys go over there at that intersection some days and watch how close we get to rear ends all the time of people coming north on 25, going west on Echo, and then they want to slam on their brakes because they're trying to get into the BP station or into Starbucks. That is guaranteed income for Mercy Hospital right there. It has been a nightmare of paramount proportions, and that's what I see is what Lenore was saying is turning into our neck of the woods. The other morning, I waited 7 minutes to turn left out of our street. 7 minutes. And I think, wow, okay, what's that going to be like if that turns into something, if this turns into something? There's no way we can put a light there because we've got a light at Costco, which oddly always turns red whenever I go to it. I don't know how that is. It always turns red. So I was wondering, and I don't have the map right in front of me, is there a way to direct the traffic from this empty lot business, because I don't know what else to call it, so from the empty lot business, can't we direct it to Craig Drive? Can't we direct it to what the front of Costco, what the front of Black Diamond is? Direct the traffic out that way. If the parking lot isn't where it's supposed to be in the first place, and it's just a parking lot that they put all sorts of junk on and stacks of mulch and dirt and everything else that is unsightly, why can't we put the front of this place, the entrance to it anyway, coming from there where all the traffic is anyway? Can't we do that and then leave the Black Diamond Drive, as they call it? Can't we leave that as their service thing? They can leave their gate where it is. They can open and close it as they have service trucks come in that are going to dump things, but we can leave the business part coming in from where the front of, I keep saying Costco, the front of Black Diamond.
So I think that the quick answer to what you're suggesting is it's going to be so the front of this lot, if you look at it, is not going to be allowed a curb cut, is my understanding.
Right,
So
it can't be a curb
the
cut.
driveways you're talking about are all private property, so they're private drives. So really, what's going to probably happen is since they own the lot that's right next to it, is a shared driveway agreement so that their people can use this driveway. And then there's just nothing that's going to prevent them from cutting through. But that's really hard to regulate as far as a public entity is concerned.
But that's why I was saying, if it's a shared driveway, why does it have to be the one that's behind Calendar Court? Why can't it be the other one coming from the other direction, from the front of Black Diamond, instead of from the rear end of Black Diamond, which will cut down on the traffic, will cut down on the cut-throughs. They can leave their gate up there. All they'd have to do would be just to either have it open whenever they've got a service person coming in. They get a lot of customers that come in through that way. There's a lot of traffic that goes through there, which is surprising to me. But there's a light there, so I guess people trying to turn left and they want to go east on Echo, I guess maybe they go that way. I don't know why they would, because it's
My guess would be, and this is me, I guess, imposing what my thoughts are. If I were that person that was going to rent that building, And from a logistics standpoint, my customers couldn't access it through the intersection that's already there, and they had to go all the way around. That'd be a really confusing thing for your everyday customer.
It could be, but it certainly satisfies a lot of the problems that the people who were there first are having to deal with now with broken promises and the potential of hurting our property. If you haven't been down Calendar Court, and one of the reasons why it's such a lovely place, besides the people, is that it's an oasis. I was a real estate agent once in another lifetime. The three most important words: location, location, location. I can walk anywhere I want to go. I can walk to my store, I can walk to my grocery, I can walk to my favorite restaurant, I can walk to my doctor's. Everywhere I want to go, I can walk. It's a perfect location. But the thing that's cool about it is that because of where we're at, it's its own oasis. You don't have that sense that you're right in the middle of a town. Yet you guys are engulfing us, you're strangling us, and that's what we're fighting against. And that's why the OS was tolerable, because it wouldn't be that kind of suffocation. But what I'm seeing with the C3 even is another form, death by a slow boil, of strangulation onto our oasis that was always there. We had to deal with all the houses coming in from the east, and now we're dealing with all this noisy business coming in from the west with traffic that is just becoming almost unbearable. So that's where our concern is. That's why we're seeking your help and throwing out some other suggestions. Please help us keep our oasis.
All right, thank you, Sue. Pete, you have sort of raised your hand a couple times.
I would request two things. I know Brody's office doesn't have anything else to do, but I would like them at some point to take a look at the Black Diamond site plan. The one I have, they aren't following. Second, what I would like to be notified of whenever you get in. I'm presuming that this committee is going to recommend approval of the C3 zoning. I would like to be notified of when site plans come in so that I can take a look at it too.
Yes, on number 2, Brody, is that, I mean, I called Pete about this meeting, but that's probably an unreliable way of providing notification. When it comes up for site plan review at the planning commission, are you saying in advance, Pete, before the planning commission?
I'd like, whenever they get it in, I'd like to take a look at it.
So in effect, you're making a public records request?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Kate's in the back of the room, so she's acknowledged that
I absolutely.
that request has been received.
I don't know if you have my card, but I'll get you a card so that you can reach out to me, which is about 12 different levels, but I'll get you a card so you can reach out to me.
I don't have cards.
I know. I have your card. So that we can make sure that we keep you guys informed and give you notice. I do have a question. So after you say what you are or not doing with this, I have a question for the three of you.
And I have a quick question for Brody, just so you guys better understand the process, hopefully. When the site plans come in, is that typically a multi-meeting ordeal where there's modifications or, because I want you guys to know, keep coming to the meetings as long as it's going. That's going to be your best handle on this, is making your voice heard every step of the way. So if it's a multiple meeting ordeal, I want you guys to be ready for that fight as well, to make sure that you guys feel like you're involved in the building process as well, or site planning.
Assuming that the proposal that is brought forward does not require special approval use, which I don't believe is the case in this. We encourage applicants to do one of two things: either to meet with my office ahead of time to make sure that they are fully aware of what the requirements are, so that if they choose to submit their package in one meeting, as a preliminary and a final site plan review together, they can do that. We don't like applicants to do that without meeting with us first, because there's a lot of small nuances of the code that they're not well positioned to receive the approval anyways. If they choose not to meet with us ahead of time, we tell them if they have the time to spare, it's a good insurance policy to go through with a preliminary site plan one meeting and then follow that up with a final site plan. And what that does is the preliminary site plan, if you think about it, is a piece of paper, and you take blocks and you set them on the piece of paper. So here's a building, here's a parking lot, here's where our driveway is at. It's a very high level, just a couple boxes on a piece of paper to make sure that the overall site arrangement makes sense. If that's approved and all the assumptions that were made arranging the boxes on the piece of paper, that allows you to come back and invest the money with a landscape architect, with a geotechnical engineer who's going to review your parking lot layouts, to design building elevations, have an architect tell you it's going to be made out of brick or architectural metal panels or whatever the case is. But the mistakes that we see are when people typically don't ask the questions up front, they want to knock it out in one meeting, then there's only one review. But we'll either have one very detailed review or two kind of smaller session reviews.
Okay, and keeping in mind, obviously lighting and sound is kind of the importance, so making sure they are on notice for those two particular things.
I can tell you that in terms of lighting, and that's why I was really asking about the problem with the vehicles, but in terms of lighting, we always ask for a photometric plan. And a photometric plan specifies the heights, the types of lights, the shielding angles, all of these things. And what we do is we make sure that this photometric plan, it indicates light values on the ground as it moves away from a light source. And we make sure when we review these, the light sources are zero just outside of the property line. So you have light spilling on the ground outside of the properties. We pride ourselves on containing the light in that site. But I'm still struggling with the comment about the cars using the Black Diamond Boulevard or Drive or whatever we're referring to that as. When I have conversations with Black Diamond, I still don't understand. Cars using a roadway is not in and of itself problematic. If they're driving too fast, if they're making too much noise, if they're shining headlights into someone's bedroom window, those are all problems that have solutions to them. But cars simply driving on a paved road in a high quantity or a low quantity, I don't know how I express that as a problem, if that makes sense.
Well, I would say the problem is just an interest for both sides in decreasing the volume.
Well, I think volume is a potentially a safety concern next to a residential area after hours of business.
So you're talking about in terms of security. So if there was some type of,
Right
right
now-
now, they have to cross a ditch. If somebody were to park and want to cause harm they'd have to park, walk across the grass area, down through a ditch, up through landscaping. If a fence provides a sense of security, but providing that the cars are maintained and they don't have loud mufflers and squealing brakes and those sorts of things, if they're running up here constantly, I'm struggling to figure out the problem I'm trying to solve.
Well, in simple terms, the problem is to reduce the incentive to cut through.
So
And or the noise.
Yeah,
I think because there's a volume that comes with traffic.
if they could choose, it's a private drive, couldn't they say, it might be a little misleading, but they could post signage out there and say access to Black Diamond property only, and it might discourage some people from using that as a cut through.
Strictly enforced.
Yeah.
You would think it would be in Black Diamond's interest to stop people from driving through their driveway or their parking lot. That's their self-interest. And frankly, if you lived up anywhere on 25, you're coming through that parking lot. You're not driving around, you get in. So 50% of that traffic is coming from the north side.
All right, well, we're kind of delving into site plan review at this point. Now, we do have Kate and Pete connected, so we'll get the site plan to you when it comes in. And the notification that comes, that's per the code, right? It's not a special thing we're doing here. Now in the case of this, when he submitted an amended application, That didn't require new notice formally through the mail?
We did review that, and basically it was determined that the issue, it was still a live issue. We never brought finality and closed an issue, so whenever we bring up a new issue, notice is sent out. It was determined that anybody that was tracking this issue up to its current state could have gathered from that last meeting that it was being referred back to the planning commission, so new notice was not sent. So it's some of an interpretation aspect of it, and we thought we understood that Pete had connections to, kind of that half of the room, and that whether formally or informally, the word was getting out.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I left a message for you, but apparently you were in Canada visiting your property you haven't seen in 2 years. So.
Correct.
I didn't know I was the only link, though. I'm sorry. That's why I said that for the purposes of the next thing, they're not going to rely on me and you talking. We'll have an official notice you get in the mail. I mean, not to say we don't like to talk, but we're not terribly reliable communicators, I guess. Committee, it sounds as if everyone is sort of reluctantly agreeable to C3 zoning, and so we would put that in the form of recommendation to council. Yes?
Now that everybody said yes, I'm sorry. Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we are comfortable with that going to city council on Tuesday.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
It normally would, so, yeah.
This is going to go to city council on Tuesday. It will be on the agenda. It will be under the planning and zoning committee. For C3, there will be an ordinance. It'll look much like the ordinance the last time, except instead of C4, it will say C3. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew. You too, but I can't really see you.
Council meeting will be at 6:30.
Council meeting is at 6:30. There is an appointment review committee before that at about 6:20, but council will start at 6:30.
And it'll be under planning and zoning portion of that meeting.
All right.
Okay,
Enough said on that.
Is there any reason to believe that would be passed as an emergency?
I don't think we need to do it. I guess that's a question for the committee.
I guess I'm just asking in terms of the applicant, understanding what's moving forward. If it's passed on Tuesday, it may be 30 days. I'm assuming it's only going to be one reading.
Yeah.
My guess is we'll waive 3 readings.
So maybe 30 days after the next council meeting.
Yeah. Yep, that's the way it would be.
So, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. Can you restate that again? I maybe have missed that. It would be the first reading with additional readings waived, is that correct? Or it would be first reading voted upon and resolution at that point?
Now, the likely resolution will be this. It'll be introduced for a first reading, and as is the case with many of our ordinances, we'll waive a second and a third reading, and we'll pass it, but it doesn't become effective until 30 days later.
I see. So upon vote for approval, 30 days to finalize.
Right, correct. Correct.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, as I've said before, you're welcome to stay, but more than free to go. We're going to talk about arborvitae and our budget.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you all for coming out.
And speaking of arborvitae, I see Kate standing there, so I assume that means you sent us some today, Kate, but
I printed it out for you. You should have an arborvitae packet in front of you
I
on
do?
the table.
Oh, yeah.
I made one for each of you. So the first page is the code as it's currently written for walls, fences, and arbor. Okay.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I know.
Corey did.
I just said
Oh,
just so our audio recording doesn't have a bunch of
background noise.
yeah, because we do upload that, I believe, or the video.
Yeah.
So
I think it's audio right
I
now.
think it's audio for committees. It's video.
But that question you asked is being worked on.
Good.
So you know.
Good.
There is.
That's why I like to hear it because
There is good progress being made on that issue.
yes.
I think.
Okay. Well, don't get my hopes up and then Sweep my legs next
I'll
meeting.
just crush them next week.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good.
Crush them completely next Tuesday. Okay, so the first page is the rules, or the code as it currently exists. The second and third page were the original proposals where we just changed one chart and added stars to sort of explain what you could and could not do. I think that the fourth and fifth pages are what you should look at. Planning Commission was not, I believe, opposed to this idea, but they thought that it was confusing in the form it came to them because it came in one chart. And they suggested that we split fences, walls, and screens from hedges and plantings so that you could see the chart more clearly. I actually thought that was a really good idea. I know that's not really, but so that now you can see what is or is not permitted without a bunch of stars in the proposed so far in the hedges and plantings.
So it's essentially the exact same.
It's just too much information for one.
Yeah, but
Yes.
we're just splitting it into two charts so you have a reference point for hedges.
Yes,
All right, I like that.
absolutely. So the question is, which one do you all prefer, and are there any additional changes you would like made before it goes to City Council, if you want to vote to send it to City Council?
So,
My recommendation to this group, and I know this is painful for me to say this, my recommendation for you would be to send it to the Planning Commission for review, because I'm not sure that they ever made it in depth to the chart enough to get the content of what it means. They just knew they couldn't easily understand what the charts were saying when it was all in one. And trust me, I'm the last person who wants to go through the arborvitae conversation again. But I also don't want to end up with something that's flawed because we didn't take the extra step to have somebody dig into each individual square in the chart and look at it.
I would almost, my suggestion would be, I wish we did the side and rear yards as double stars on that for special, so it get kind of special use permitting on commercial.
Those are the kind of things we need to iron out.
Yeah, because I know we stopped it at commercial last time this conversation was in front of us. But if we're gonna allow for special use on the front yard up to 8 feet and R1 through R5, I think we should strongly consider using the same process for commercial. So there's some sort of approval and safeguard for residents, but still allows, it doesn't completely make it non-permissive.
So, Councilman Kuhlman, I just want to confirm that you would like 2 stars on side yard
And rear yard for C1 through C4. That's
Okay.
what I would propose,
So-
obviously. I lost that argument last time, I think.
some of us thought further about it, thought you weren't completely crazy.
Some of us are still on the fence about the last
You know, but
sentence.
the
Can I get this recording when we're done, please?
But the way I'm reading this, Kate,
Yes?
there's still on a side yard, a hedge and planting can't exceed 8 feet, nor can it on a rear yard. That's the way I'm reading it.
It's permissible.
No, you're right.
It's up to
Up
8 feet.
to.
Up to 8 feet.
Oh,
You are correct, I'm sorry. When I was doing this, I told Brody that I was having a brain fart that day. We had previously said that 2 stars meant fences and walls 8 feet or higher not permitted if the property is, I'm sorry. The 2 stars, fences and walls 8 feet or higher not permitted, hedges and screen plantings of any height permitted. So I guess what we have to do is, instead of just P where it says permitted, we have to say,
well, I think you just make another category that's 8 or more feet, or
Right,
8 and above.
right, so another column, for lack of a better term,
Yeah,
for 8 feet or higher. And wherever you see a P, we would put that P in the 8 feet or higher as well.
I mean, that's what you have on pages 2 and 3.
Yes.
Okay, and as far as going back to planning commission, Brody, I'll defer to you on that. I mean, do you think,
Do you want to know what they have to say?
well, I also don't want to tick them off by saying, we keep sending this back to you and you keep giving us the wrong answer.
Well, this is a direct result of what they suggest to be broken out, but then they will have not seen it.
Okay.
What the solution to what they showed was the problem last time. So I think in some ways they may be expecting to see it come back.
Okay, well then,
The other thing I do want to point out is the gentleman that was here about the camper, the front yard double star 8-foot R1 through R5 is exactly his issue. He said, my neighbor wouldn't be allowed to put up a 10-foot fence, but he's allowed to park this thing here.
mhm.
This guy's not going to care if the camper, or he will care if the camper leaves and an 8-foot row of something goes up, because his complaint, like I've been advocating the entire time, is more about the effect that whatever it is. It's not about what it is, it's about the effect it's creating.
Isn't that double star just for 2 corner lots?
It could be, yeah.
Because that's what I'm reading, is if the property has 2 front
And not that
yards.
this guy, the picture that he showed doesn't appear to be a corner lot, but we don't know if on the other side of him is a corner lot, and if they would put it along one of the frontages, his view would be blocked.
But it still has to be approved, right? So he would have a right to show up to that meeting, because it says it goes to BZA.
With the BZA approval. The problem is the requirements that they use to approve variances in some cases can be very subjective. And so that there's not a hard, fast set of requirements. Like if your neighbor, if the neighbor doesn't object, or, he can go there and say, this is a terrible idea, and they can say, well, it's 60 feet away from you, it's not that big of a deal, and they can approve it. So I just want to be mindful, because it plays into the whole conversation we've had up to this point with arborvitaes and fences, and we've talked about the attractiveness of certain things blocking your view as opposed to other things, which I will agree matters. I'd rather have a good fence blocking my view than a run-down ramshackle fence, but some people will complain about just lack of visibility.
Well,
They seem to be.
and when we asked how we ended up with where we were, or where we are, it was because of that. It was the visibility component. And then here we experience it with, so I'm not sure I understand that side yard idea, because I know you guys were saying that. Explain that to us.
If this is the property, okay,
Yes,
and it sits on a corner, it has 2 front yards.
understood.
So the idea is that one of these front yards could potentially be approved for,
Would be treated like a side.
could be treated as a side yard and would be approved for planting. I think the thought being that when presented to BZA, wherever the front door is would be the one that's the front yard.
Yeah, this
We have-
specifically comes, that double star comes from my living situation at the time, which was on Boundary Street, and you have, his name is Dave.
Dave, no.
Yeah, he would technically have 2 front yards, and he has an existing hedge on the 6th Street side. And it was me thinking there needs to be a process to approve that. Because I'm sure there's several examples of that.
And I drove by and I saw where you were talking about it, and it makes sense
Yeah.
because there's nothing, he's on a street.
Yeah.
But if you were next to somebody, it would make you happy.
But if this is a house in the middle and this is a house and this is a house, it's gonna be the worst recording ever, I apologize. They only have 1 front yard. There is no additional front yard, because there's property on either side.
So they can't.
So you're saying so that corner lot technically has to have a street on one side
Yes.
and a
Yes.
frontage on the other. So,
Yes.
so that's the rationale, is that it's on,
Yes.
if you will, it's on the street side.
Yeah, it's not gonna
Yes.
block a neighbor.
So this is the no site plan. So you have East Boundary and I think 7th or 6th Street here.
Right.
So what they're saying is this is essentially the vulnerable side of your property, because this is your front door. Everything's oriented here. Your driveway comes into the garage. So what that would allow, is plantings along there, because presumably there's no detriment to the person here, because there is no person here, it's the street. And your next closest neighbor would be over here.
So it's basically the BZA would make sure they're not putting it in front of their driveway of their house where we would stay the front yard.
And I know you know this property
Yeah.
very well, but if you were this house wanting to look this way, right, it would be the same thing as a travel trailer. And I'm just posing that as an argument.
Yeah, no, and I get that.
I'm referring to the.
See, my guess is the neighbor that's on the street next to them, and again, this is just me projecting my own thoughts, is they can understand how you'd want privacy when you have two front yards. Because you're really, I mean, with that two front yard standard that we set, it really limits what you could do for privacy into your back corner of your lot.
The only thing I could
That
see
makes sense.
doing is limiting it to the back half of that frontage. Because most activities for people happen behind the rear of the house or the midpoint of the house. Like if you were gonna have a swimming pool, or a hot tub or something like that, it would probably exist back here.
And that's what Dave's does, actually.
You could.
He's got a huge tree in the corner of the lot, but
allow that, and maybe not the front half, so
Well, isn't-
half of the.
And I thought that's what we did, Brody. We said, for fencing purposes, side yard shall consist only the area between the front of the house to the midpoint of the side yard.
so it wouldn't be, it still
So
would
that-
not encroach on the front. You would still deem it's
But
front. in front of
that's,
the house.
that's for an actual side yard. I don't know if that's the intention for calling a front yard something different.
I think you're designating, my intent for that language, I think it's the same as the point you're trying to make, is you're designating which one's the side yard at that point.
Okay, so it
When you're going to BZA, it's going to
becomes,
be, for the purposes of your fence and your hedge, it becomes the side yard and has to follow those rules.
we just need to make sure that that's
Yeah.
clear.
My interpretation is the same as Mr. Coleman's, that if we're saying that they can build because it's technically a side yard, even though it's a front yard, it then has to follow the rules of the side yard. And we
So it'd
can-
still be halfway back on the house and
Yeah.
that stuff.
If that's a preferable,
Yeah.
so that eliminates the concern you're talking about, Barry, of that.
Right.
Yeah, as long as everybody's gonna read that and all agree that that's what it says and does.
I think
Can
what
you
we
include
should
this
do is.
Can we just include this picture in the,
Yes,
ordinance?
because in 20 years, everybody's gonna know what we
Yeah.
meant by that picture. I think what we should do is if you look at your last page where it says if the property has two front yards, 1 yard may have hedges and screen plantings, I think we change that to 1 yard may be designated
As a side yard.
as a side yard exclusively for this purpose.
Oh, which you're gonna laugh because my suggestion no longer carries water of using the same star system for commercial. So my suggestion would be adding a third star to the commercial stuff so that they go before BZA, but I don't know if that overcomplicates this chart. Because if it comes back and there's a third chart, I'm just gonna die laughing.
Yeah.
I will.
Maybe put an S there for special use through the BCA,
I will work on what it is that you
We'll
suggested.
let the law director draft it.
And do you want me
Planning
to bring it
commission.
back to you in November before we, I mean, honest to God, I think we all like kind of want to kill ourselves, but like, where do you want it to go next? with-
As long as there's not ongoing enforcement issues that's created by the time we're taking for Brody and Mark,
No, we.
I have no problem seeing it over and over again as long as we're making headway.
Okay, I will take into consideration the side yard, front yard, but the commercial property issue that we just created with our solution.
The commercial, if they're okay with that.
But there's also somebody here who might be wanting to speak about this.
Oh,
And see if I can help.
someone else who's interested in arborvitae.
I don't even know what's going on yet. I'm trying to absorb.
Like a copy of it?
Yeah,
What's that?
Like a copy of
if
it?
you're not confused enough.
It's really the last 2 pages, so.
Well, yeah, you showed me this.
This is brand new today.
Oh,
The last two pages have a separate chart
okay.
on the last page for
All
hedges.
I'm interested in right now is, what are we doing with arborvitae's? Because this is about fences, right?
That's
No,
not
it's
everybody.
fine.
Oh, it is about, okay.
We're gonna have 2 charts, one for fences, the way you and I would think of a fence, in the other chart for shrubs, hedges, blah, 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 including arborvitae.
Our previous code consolidated hedges with fencing.
It treated them all the same.
Yes.
The attempt of splitting out the charts was to treat them similarly but different. So that packet there, the last 2 pages, one is for wooden traditional fences or, you know.
So to sum up that last chart, basically, we're allowing arborvitae's in residential areas at any height as long as it's in the rear and side yards.
Which I think in your case, your concern is yours in your rear yard, is that correct?
Yes.
So
I
that
mean,
one,
I have them all the way around my yard, in my back.
Okay, yeah, in the rear yard, yeah.
but not forward of the front of your house, right?
No, correct. But
That probably addresses what you,
Is your own wilderness?
I'm on Fort Meigs.
Or mix? Okay.
But, so, arborvitae's, we have some other things that were there before I even bought the house. I think they're used. They're probably 8 feet tall. They're all the way to the street. So that's not technically.
that, according to that, that's probably gonna be a violation.
What's your address, if you don't mind me asking?
24690 Fort Meigs. And then just random trees, like pine trees all in the yard. That doesn't, that's.
Anything that is of a uniform and consistent nature, which is designed to block, to act as a fence, to contain
Okay,
something,
okay.
to delineate a boundary. But you're welcome to plant, 100 trees in your yard as long as they're not all lined up like soldiers across the property line or something like that.
I think that's,
But on the back, just to clarify, the back, everything's acceptable now.
that's what we're
Well,
proposing. The code has not changed.
Right.
It's still in process.
But it's my understanding enforcement is not,
Correct. Yeah.
while this is pending, we're not enforcing,
Yeah.
except for maybe,
I'm sure there's a lot of people that are gonna be planting trees on the back of our properties because of the apartments that went behind
Yeah.
us, so that's why.
yeah, it looks like the trees that you have, are they overgrown trees or large trees on the north side? May be something you have to consider as
Yes.
a potential violation in the future.
Well, I don't even know if they're mine or theirs, but
Gotcha.
yeah, we like them because it's privacy. But
I mean, that.
so technically, we can plant, like, I guess these are ahead then.
So these would be potential issues as well.
So what is?
Because then it's cutting the visibility of your neighbor to the,
Wow, so what's the code then for in front of the property, in the front of the house?
4 feet?
4 feet.
Really?
Yeah, but again, this is a row, it's not a random tree.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's
But I
what,
just want to make sure you knew it was like a hedge.
yeah, okay.
And BZA can approve 6 feet.
okay.
And that's already code?
No, that's what we're working on.
No, that's current.
That's in the current.
Oh, okay.
It's 4 feet and approval of 6 feet from BZA. In the front yard of R1 through R5.
Okay, well, right now, I'm just interested to follow the process to see where you guys end up. I mean, I think you know where I'm coming from. I definitely am supporting changing the code, so.
Yeah, it'll go back to planning commission once we get everything sorted out and make sure all our charts are right and all our words are right. And then eventually it would come back here. But the purpose of doing all this is to make some changes.
I'm surprised I'm the only one here. Wasn't there somebody complaining about, I think you mentioned it, the visual. Somebody was trying to put up trees and they couldn't because of the code and they were changed. Did that die?
No, that was Kevin Ranton, and he was a landscape type guy. He's gotten out of that business, but he had some customers who had arborvitae, and he kind of was the one. And then, well, there were some other people too. I remember there was a lady who. So there's been a few people, but see, not many people are really aware of it because. We haven't, I don't think Brody and Mark have gone out and cited people, repeatedly saying tear your trees down or chop them down. So not that many people are aware of it.
Wait, you've done that, or you?
We've notified a handful of folks over the last year or so that they had new plantings that were in violation of the code. Like they might go all the way down their side property line, from the sidewalk to the back corner of their property and put 6 or 8 foot arborvitae.
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's a timing thing, because that law that's on the books now only started like recently, didn't it? Like 2014 or something?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, because the mine have been in longer. So I'm okay because of that, right? On the front.
I would say probably not, because things that grow are constantly, I mean, you still have to maintain them at that height. You know, of what the code says now of 4 feet. Now, if that changes, then you might have to maintain those at 6 foot, but it's a performance standard. So it's not necessarily something that's grandfathered in, because they're constantly growing. It's kind of a weird situation, I guess, but.
Okay, well, the backyard is what I'm concerned with now. I mean, I'm supporting, obviously. That position, you need this back.
You're welcome to have it if you want.
Yeah, I just don't.
It's yet to be modified again though, so.
So November will be the next discussion where.
December 12th.
Well,
Is that
it's gonna come
Planning
back here
Commission.
Okay.
before it goes around, right? Is that what you want?
No, I thought we were going to send it to the planning commission.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, for the reasons you said, Brody.
I just didn't know if it was gonna come here for you to look at, to then send to them to come back, or.
No, I'd say, I don't know, what do you guys think?
He was talking about another column, that sort of thing. I didn't know if you wanted to kind of semi-bless it before you.
Send it to him.
It's up to you.
I don't know, what do you think?
I mean, there's time to do it. The next planning commission meeting is December 9th after the October meeting. So there's time in November.
They don't have a November meeting?
No.
They merge November and December together for the holidays.
Oh, okay. Okay, well then, yeah, bring it back here. I mean, are you guys okay with that?
I think we should.
We'll try and wrap our head around it
Try
again.
to polish it before you send it off to them.
Okay, well, so then, our meeting in November would be what date, Mark, did you say?
Second Wednesday, the 10th. November 10th.
Yeah, that's right. November 10th at 5:30.
So you're bringing it back here, Kate?
Yes,
Want to make sure you heard that.
I'm gonna have 6 charts for court. I'm gonna break everything out
Seems appropriate.
so that there's as many charts as you can possibly come up.
So we need a chart for the chart, so we know which chart to look at.
You're gonna have charts for the charts.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here for that issue.
No, it's all right. I'm just quiet back here.
So budget, I'll give you the quick rundown on this.
Yeah.
This packet that I gave you is basically the same information 4 different ways. So pick the format that you like. The first one is Dave Krepp's old budget format.
Yep.
The second one is the same exact thing, but it's expanded. It's more of a line item budget that Amber has now liked to use. The last one is, the last one is the worksheet that helps populate some of those line items. So I find the first page to be the most helpful, that's why I put it on the front. But the first page and the second and third page, it's all the same information. This just gets more into the details of, like, for example, the front page might only have the contracts line item and it says a dollar amount. If you look at the expanded version, I've put in there some things that contract money is typically used for, like surveys, preliminary layouts, and other small projects. So if there's something that catches your eye in the front one, you can flip to the second one and figure out what these expenses are.
And I did want to point out, let me just do this for a second. If you look at the first page, Finance has asked that the staff salaries go into one line for budgeting purposes, and I think Mr. McCarthy, you were here yesterday, right? So this has been explained to Mr. McCarthy repeatedly, but not to either of the other 2 of you. So where it says 0 for zoning, 0 for zoning inspector, and all of those were zeroed out, we didn't suddenly fire everybody. Those salaries went up, which is why the P&Z staff increased 197.17%, And those other positions decreased by 100%.
But if you want the breakdown of how that particular box was,
Yeah.
280,000 is filled out, look at the two last pages, because that's the information that I use to populate that. So all the information is there, it's just a matter of how you prefer to see it.
And what you did is, and we may, Mark, that whole issue of collapsing all those salaries into one item, that may be something we want to talk about. Is after I left
I
here
really
last,
like this, the way Brody did this.
yeah, and I, you know, in the smaller departments or divisions, it allows you to know, okay, I mean, look at planning and zoning, you're talking 4 people. And we know who's going up, who's staying the same, and I don't mind knowing that. So that's another issue. But
I think we can, like, for the purposes of the planning and zoning budget, we can do what finance wants by providing the format here.
Sure.
For
Oh,
sheet.
yeah, I'm sure you
As long as I continue to give you the supporting documentation here on the back end. Because that will, if you notice the initials on the left-hand side,
Mhm.
these are, our 4 people, and you can reference across there, and everything's labeled from salary to PERS and Medicare and workers' comp.
Well, and you're proposing no salary increase for you and Heather.
Correct.
Mark has, Bridget told us in her email that he had to come up because of the pay band adjustment. He was considerably lower than his band. And Cody goes from 56.6 to 61 something. Does that mean a 9% increase?
Yeah, and what that is it's not a pay band adjustment, but it is a consistency adjustment with the wage and survey study.
Mhm.
So that was to get, the goal, at least as I understood it, of the city was to get to the average actual of all of the cities that were surveyed. And to get Cody to be at the actual average, not ahead of the average or below the average, but the actual average, that was a 61,712 number. So the mayor has said, that's our target. So that prompted me to adjust and propose a 9% raise, 7 of which he has the authority to do on his own. The other 2% would presumably have to come to you to authorize the other 2%.
And just procedurally, if we approve the budget where we see that 9% increase, that is the approval. I don't think we do a separate ordinance.
I don't know if that's ever, I've never experienced it before, so I
I
don't know.
haven't seen anything in personnel either on the raises above the 7
That's
either,
I
but we
don't-
haven't had a meeting.
Well, the thing is, budgeting for an expense is one thing, actually executing an expense is another, and I think my opinion is that there ought to be another approval given to actually expend that money. This year, earmarking it and saying it's reserved for a purpose, but in terms of authorization of spending it,
When it comes to raises, I have kind of come to the expectation, I should say. I expect that our committee's going to review the wage changes as they're implemented, specifically I want to see them all, but specifically the ones that are over 7%.
Yes.
Outside the normal budgeting process.
Well, but see, I don't know
I'm
completely.
sorry, Mr. Coleman, what is it that you'd like to see,
So since the wage study occurred, all the raises that have been given would be ideal. What we're doing to comply, I guess, so to speak.
You'd like to see the equity raises specifically?
Yes, I'd like to see.
That's kind of what, there have been no raises, let me answer this. There have been no raises other than the 2%
Uh-huh.
for any city employees, to my knowledge, other than unions whose contracts passed, except for a small handful of what we're terming equity. So I think what you're asking for are, can you see the equity raises?
I want to see any pay. Honestly, in the personnel committee, I want to get in the habit of doing when we're issuing raises, any personnel, I would like to see wage increases, decreases, staying the same across the board. And then specifically, obviously, we need to look at the ones and approve the ones over 7%. Doesn't mean I don't want the information on the other one.
Right, no, no.
So I know we talked about biannual reviews of certain ordinances, but I would like to get in the habit of looking at the wages every single year. Every time someone's determined to get a raise, I would like that to come before the committee, just so council has that information and we feel like we've had that talk and we're simpatico with the administration.
Which years ago we did have.
Yeah, and I think that's a good practice. I would like to get into that.
Okay.
So I think it plays into what you were talking about as well.
Do you want that to come to personnel in 2 weeks, would you like that?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And it may not be anything we act on, maybe get the information to us that night and have a discussion a different night.
Yeah, if
If we can get the information to you before the meeting, would you like that?
Yeah, the way I'm envisioning is you get us the information whenever you want. I think there's a good, it's good. I prefer it to have the meeting where you guys do a presentation, you take us through X, Y, and Z, so I better understand the way you formatted it and the information, and then maybe revisit it to see if we have questions the next meeting.
100%.
So, because I don't always get to every tidbit of information before those committee meetings.
100%.
And Brody, on the planning and zoning services, did it show up in front? Oh, yeah, it did. Large equipment, 95. You're planning on buying 3 vehicles this year?
Yes, I put in a request. I assumed that we would, I guess my proposal to the administration was to purchase 1 vehicle for the next 3 years. Planning and Zoning Office has never had its own vehicles. We've always received the hand-me-down police vehicles. Quite honestly, those things are whipped. Seats are broken, have holes cut in them.
No AC.
No air conditioning. Anything you can think of is wrong with them, they're wrong with them. I would argue that no one should get them, let alone our division. So my proposal was to purchase 1 new vehicle a year for the next 3 years.
I see.
I was told our vehicles are in bad shape, budget for all 3 of them this coming year. So what you see there is 3 $30,000 vehicles and a $5,000 charging station, and that is, the mayor has expressed an interest in going with 2 electric vehicles.
What kind of vehicles are they? I know this is.
It was likely to be the Chevy Bolt, but they're experiencing some fire issues right now. So assuming they get those straightened out, they would be small runaround,
Okay.
100% electric, probably Chevy Bolts.
So smaller sedans, basically.
They're the most affordable,
Yeah.
smallest. We were also looking at a Ford Explorer hybrid because some of the work that we do requires us to transport things. So we wanted 2 small vehicles to run out to inspections, and if we needed, a small sport utility vehicle that would be our 3rd vehicle. But we don't need 3 Tahoes and certainly cars that are in that poor condition.
Now, you could, though, get by with 1 per year?
We
And
could.
then what would you use the other 2, the old beat-up cop cars?
Yeah, but we're putting money in those. I mean, they're using oil, they get flat tires, the AC doesn't work. They're pretty miserable cars. But
You should buy 3.
yeah, I mean, I agree with it. It's just I was kind of going into it slower. I would be happy if it happened in 3 years, but if it could happen tomorrow, that'd be awesome. So
Just what we want is them sweaty and agitated right when they're going to meet with citizens about zoning issues.
You're gonna cut that bush down if it kills.
Yeah, I think we need to further review that line.
the one thing that I'll say is it may make sense to buy the 2 electric vehicles at the same time for pricing breaks and making sure that there's no model year compatibility issues with charging and those sorts of things. So if it does get cut down for any reason to 1, we probably would buy the singular hybrid vehicle first and then wait till the following year. But we may end up having to do that anyways with the Chevy Bolt issue.
Are we doing any public electric charging stations?
We have them over the.
I thought we do about inside the 5.
We
I was
do.
wondering if there's a way to almost have those accessible to the public after hours. If our cars are charged or something, something so we're getting an extra bang for our buck. But
Our only concern was if somebody comes and unplugs our car, we need it.
Right.
We were going to mount one on the MRE building out back, which is
Okay.
the building Jeff Studer was in. But I think the mayor has an interest in having some more of those things pop up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it'd be
But
I get that concern though. 'Cause we-
IT
He's a green advocate.
is also looking at electric vehicles because they run from department to department or divisions, and they were like a Chevy Bolt would be perfect for us too, so that we could share that charges. We may end up having 3 to 4 cars with 2 charging ports.
Okay.
We would share
Yeah.
one ourselves, so.
Okay.
We certainly won't duplicate efforts if we don't need them.
Okay.
I think that's really the only significant change in the budget. You'll notice at the very bottom, it's a reduction from 622 to 564. Some of that is the land use plan. Some of that is phasing out the subdivision inspections.
Yeah. I kind of assume we're gonna have to pay some more on that land use plan. That seems to have turned into more of an exercise than,
So far, we don't plan on having any additional expenses unless.
okay.
Well, maybe they're cutting us a break because they couldn't really perform the task at hand with COVID.
I think that's part of it. They're willing to do a little bit more additional work, but.
Because I mean, that our community, part of our issues are directly derived from the community forums that people felt like they didn't have access to. So it's.
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't, I'm not encouraging them to increase their price, but if they did, I don't think I'd be completely surprised, particularly now with this flap over the heights.
It hasn't come up so far, and it sounds like they're still working within their expected scope, so.
Okay, well.
And everybody got the email about the November 2nd,
Yes.
5:30
Yep.
public presentation about that? Okay.
Yeah.
There'll be more that comes out, but.
When did you send that out?
Yeah, just make sure. It sounds like they're having a meeting at the Heights this week.
2 days ago?
Oh, are
Yeah. Because I had someone ask me about the Heights meeting.
Huh.
Tuesday.
All right, well then, if the minutes can just reflect that we reviews the proposed budget for the Planning, Zoning, and Economic Development Division. And, it sounds as if we're all satisfied that it's in order.
Yes.
Because Mark in Finance Committee last night gave the usual charge, start sending it out to the substantive committees for
You do it the
reviews.
next day.
And so we're the first to come through, I assume.
I do have, Mr. Rucker just pointed something out to Brody. November 2nd is election day. Do you still want to do the committee of the whole on election day?
Well, I did ask the consultant, because originally it was supposed to be the 19th of October. He had a commitment that he could not get around.
Right.
He expressed an interest on his behalf of keeping this moving and keeping the momentum with the conversation. So he's like, I would really like to do it. And he said, if they're having a council meeting anyways.
That's fine. I don't want to be sitting at home anyway. Right, Barry? We don't want to do that, do we?
I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Van Hoosen was, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of that, but
When he said the second, that's what came to mind for some reason.
I don't know why that is. I can't
That date
imagine.
is familiar to me.
I can't imagine.
Huh. Yeah, if the candidates are okay with it, I am.
That's fine.
What else do they have to do that day? Keep your mind off things.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
We'll make all 3 of you sit down there and like stress this.
Sure, I'll
together.
switch seats. Barry, you can take my seat that day.
No thanks.
Corey will have his laptop up with a screen tuned into the board.
Just the photo license refresh? Oh, I will do that.
That's mean, but funny. You can stop recording.
Or just keep it to yourself, Corey, at the end, and then just do every now and again, whoa!
Oh, my God.
Mr. McCarthy, are you adjourning the meeting?
Yep, we're adjourned. Can't believe